Hi everyone, this is Robin, and this is just a few things on evaluation from your reading for this week. So what is evaluation? There are 4 definitions in your book for this week. One thing that you are going to be able to articulate by the end of the semester, if not sooner, is the answer to this question. What is evaluation? Not just parroting back what the authors say that are quoted in the book, but really, what do you think evaluation is? Now, when you look at the 4 definitions that are presented on pages 4 and 5, they have a few things in common. So one thing that they have in common is that evaluation is a systematic process. Evaluation isn't just ask some people some questions and say, oh, I guess this is what we should do. There, you have a plan, you execute on your plan, you gather data the way you say you're going to gather data, you analyze that data in a systematic way, and then you make sense of that data so that you can share it back to the organization. The other thing, as I said, is it involves collecting data. That data will generally be collected from people or from documents. So you might interview people, you might have focus groups, you might give people surveys, collect data from them in other ways, or you might collect data from documents. You might look at reports, you might look at websites, that sort of thing. Another thing that all the definitions of evaluation have in common is that evaluation is a process for enhancing knowledge and decision making. The purpose of evaluation is to enhance knowledge and use it for decision making, which actually brings me to the next one, which is that evaluation results will be used. And this is one that I'm going to hammer on for the next couple of minutes because it's a pet peeve of mine and a lot of other evaluators that people in organizations do evaluation and then do nothing with that information. So the rule is if you gather the information and analyze it, then you need to go ahead and use that information. So you might use it for decision making, and your decision might be, we won't do anything different. That's much different from not using the information. So you need to make sure you use the information. Now in your book, they talk about 4 different ways that evaluation information can be used. The first is what the authors refer to as instrumental use. Instrumental use basically means you're using it to make decisions. The second one, conceptual or knowledge use, is used really to clarify perceptions or understanding of whatever the thing is that you are evaluating, the thing or the person or the process is that you're evaluating. The next one, political, symbolic, persuasive use. This is where you use the data from an evaluation to persuade, to influence people or process or something else for happening. So the 3 of these, instrumental use, conceptual use, and persuasive use, are all about the actual results of the evaluation. The authors also talk about process use. Process use is a little bit different because it doesn't use the results of the evaluation per se. With process use, what we're doing is we're looking more at the evaluation practices that we use with our processes or our programs or our people. So we're looking more at the evaluation itself rather than the results of the evaluation. So regardless of how you use the evaluation, you need to make sure you use it. So when we talk about using the results of the evaluation, it's based on analyzing the information. So we start with some sort of evaluation question or questions. And as part of our structured process, we gather data. And then it turns into information, and then it turns into knowledge. So here's how that happens. Data are just the facts, the figures, the feedback, the survey results. That's what data is. Data is not something that we make decisions on in and of itself. Data needs to be changed into information. And the way data gets changed into information is by us interpreting the data to give us meaning. This is where we analyze the data through quantitative or qualitative methods. Now, a lot of people stop right there with their evaluations, but in fact, we need to go one step further to knowledge. And knowledge is what happens when we use the information in the evaluation. So if we just gather data, we get and don't use the results of the evaluation, we stop at data or we stop at information. The only way that we get to knowledge is if we continue on and actually use the information. All right, so what can be evaluated? So you heard me kind of stumbling over this earlier. There are a lot of things that can be evaluated. Generally, we think of programs that can be evaluated. We think about processes that can be evaluated. We think about products that can be evaluated. We think about people that can be evaluated. And then services, which I'm sorry doesn't start with the letter P, can also be evaluated. So each of these programs, processes, products, people, and services have their own unique and special disciplines, subdisciplines in evaluation. So there's a lot of information about how to evaluate programs. There's a lot of information on how to specifically evaluate people. What we're going to do, because this is just an entry-level, beginning-level evaluation class, is we're going to be using a general approach to evaluation, but we still can use our general approach to evaluate programs, processes, products, people, and services. If we were to take evaluation class number 2, we would probably dig specifically into the techniques for each of these kinds of evaluation. So one other thing I want to talk about before I finish this video is evaluation versus research versus HPT. So if you are in our master's degree program, if you're in MOLP or the MS in HRD, you will be taking a class in evaluation, this one. You will be taking a research class, and you will be taking a human performance technology class. And they're similar enough that people sometimes get them confused, but they're 3 very different and distinct things. So when you think about what's different between all 3 of these, it's the things that I've listed on the screen. So with evaluation, for example, the purpose of evaluation is to determine, with needs assessment, what should we do, and with evaluation, what happened. The audience for an evaluation is generally some decision maker in an organization, which might be true in HPT, but is not necessarily true at all with research. The focus of the study with evaluation really is to just look at what did happen, or what's going to happen, needs assessment, what should happen, needs assessment, or what did happen, summative evaluation. Again, different focus from research and from human performance technology. You'll see as we get a little further in the semester that there are particular designs that go along with evaluation that are different from the various designs that go along with research. Human performance technology generally doesn't talk about different kinds of study design. The next one's reliability and validity. So with research, we care very deeply about the reliability and the validity of our data. We care very deeply about sample size and that kind of thing. With evaluation and HPT, we still care about reliability and validity, but we don't care to the degree that we care in research. With research, often we're trying to gather information that we can then generalize and extrapolate to other situations. With evaluation and with human performance technology, we are looking at a particular situation, and we are not attempting to generalize or extrapolate this information beyond this exact situation at this exact time in this exact organization. So because of that, reliability and validity, it's important, but it's not important to the degree that it is in a research project. And then, of course, the way that the findings and the results of an evaluation are communicated are different. With evaluation, we generally communicate it to whoever our decision maker or the sponsor of the project is. We share with them the conclusions that we come up with. We share with them the recommendations that we have. They very often are not at all interested in the specific information and the detailed analysis of that information. They don't care about, often, they don't care about means and chi-squares and correlations and the kinds of things that in research we care very deeply how the information was handled. With evaluation and human performance technology, generally those people in the organization just want to know what we find out and what we recommend. They trust the process that we did in a useful and authentic way, as opposed to research where the process and the analysis of the data is of equal interest to most people as the results that we came up with. Also, research is generally published and available for people to consume at large. Evaluation and HPT, human performance technology projects, are generally shared with an individual or a group of individuals in an organization and are not shared outside that organization. So what's similar then? Well, what's similar is the overall process. Evaluation, research, and human performance technology have different processes, but in general, their process is figure out what you want to do, create a structured process for doing it, gather some data, analyze that data, and figure out what it means. So in general, all three, evaluation, research, and human performance technology, follow that kind of structured process. And then, of course, the other thing that they have in common are the tools and techniques that are used. So all three of these, evaluation, research, and human performance technology, have tools for gathering data. And the tools for gathering data are the tools for gathering data. An interview is an interview, whether you are interviewing for evaluation, for research, or for human performance technology. Your questions are different. The things you're looking for in the interview might be different, but the actual tool of interviewing someone is the same. If you're surveying people, the actual tool of surveying is the same, even though the intention and the actual survey might be very different for all three of these. Same with analyzing data. If you have quantitative data, there's a process for analyzing quantitative data, whether it's an evaluation process, project, a research project, or a human performance technology process. There's a technique for analyzing qualitative data, whether you're doing any one of these three. So the purpose, the intention, the audience, the focus, the design, the concern about reliability and validity, and the way things are communicated, very different between the three of these. But they do share an overall common process, and they do share tools and techniques, which is why sometimes we get a little confused between them. All right, and then just in summary, as a reminder, we talked about this in the last week, this week, but there's three types of evaluation that apply particularly to those of us who are interested in evaluating learning. That's a developmental evaluation, or what people more commonly refer to as a needs assessment. There's formative evaluation, and there's summative evaluation. Your projects, as we talked about in the last week, this week, will either be developmental evaluations or summative evaluations. So that's it. Just a couple of things I wanted to share with you from the readings for this week. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you online.